That Saturday evening, the house was filled with laughter, loud music, and the clinking of glasses. My mom wore a crown that said Birthday Queen, and my dad stood beside her like a proud king. Everyone was there: uncles, aunts, cousins, neighbors. Everyone except me. My father had told me not to come. He said it would be awkward because my sister, Hailey, was finally introducing her new boyfriend, a successful young man, he'd said proudly. I wasn't invited because, apparently, my presence made people uncomfortable ever since I stopped financially supporting them. But I still watched everything. My cousin Jenna, who never liked Hailey anyway, was secretly live-streaming the whole party to me. The moment that shut the whole party down forever came when Hailey beamed and said, "He's on a video call." Everyone gasped and gathered around. My dad held up the phone like he was showing off gold. And that's when it happened. The guy looked straight into the camera and said, "Hey. Hello, boss." The entire room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. My dad's smile dropped. My mom's mouth fell open. Hailey's face turned red. I just sat back and smiled. My name is Madison Taylor, and yes, I'm that boss. I'm 29 years old, a quiet tech genius who doesn't do loud clothes or loud people. I'm not flashy, and I've never been the favorite child. Ever since we were kids, Hailey got everything. The better room, the expensive dance lessons, even the family car when she turned 16. I was always the backup. The second option. The just-in-case Hailey fails daughter. But the thing about being underestimated your whole life is, it gives you time to build in silence. I graduated early, got my degree in computer science, and built an AI startup from my college dorm. 3 years later, I sold it for $12 million, reinvested, and quietly launched a tech firm in San Francisco. That's where I hired Ethan, Hailey's boyfriend. He didn't even know my last name when I interviewed him. He just thought I was Maddie from the board. I hired him because he was brilliant and focused. We worked closely, but I kept my personal life locked away. He never knew who I really was to Hailey. And I liked it that way. Until today. The truth is, I had no idea he was dating my sister either. He kept things professional, always talking about my girl without naming names. So imagine my surprise when Jenna texted me during the party, saying, "Hailey's BF is about to join a call. Wanna see?" I was curious, not expecting it to be Ethan. But when his face appeared and he said hello, boss, I knew the entire family was about to choke on their pride. Jenna pointed her phone toward the crowd. The switch in their faces was delicious. The same people who mocked me for not buying mom's birthday cake were now silent. The uncle who said I was too stingy for a software person had his jaw dropped. My dad lowered the phone like it was radioactive. And Hailey. She looked like someone had pulled the rug from under her. Ethan blinked, confused, and asked, "Wait, why are you all staring like that? Didn't Maddie tell you she was my boss?" "No, Ethan. Maddie didn't tell them. Because Maddie was never invited. And now, Maddie has the floor." The video call ended, but the silence didn't. My dad quietly put down the phone like it had betrayed him. My mom forced a smile, looking around to act like nothing happened, but her eyes told the truth: she was shaken. Uncle Brian cleared his throat and asked, "Madison's, his boss?" My cousin Jenna, still secretly filming, whispered, "Yep." You could feel the tension grow heavy like a storm cloud. Hailey tried to recover with a laugh, but it came out forced and awkward. "Well, that's interesting," she said, her eyes darting toward our dad. But no one laughed with her. My absence, which once seemed like a relief to them, was now the loudest presence in the room. Jenna texted me, "They look like they saw a ghost." I grinned and replied, "They kinda did." It felt good. For once, I wasn't the girl hiding in the shadows. I was the reason they were uncomfortable, and not because I failed, but because I won. Silently, powerfully, and without asking for their approval. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. Not a "how are you" call. No. A suspiciously sweet one. "Hi honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "I know things got a little weird yesterday. How about lunch this weekend? Just us girls." I almost choked on my coffee. My mom had never called me honey in years. I kept my tone cool. Sure, I said. Where? She suggested this fancy restaurant downtown, one they used to tell me I wasn't dressed well enough for. I agreed. Why not? I had a new car. A black Tesla with tinted windows and soft leather seats. I pulled up in front of the restaurant 5 minutes early and saw her waiting by the door. The moment she saw the car, her jaw dropped. Is this yours? She asked as I stepped out. Yeah. Company car, I said casually. She didn't speak for a second. At the table, she acted like nothing had ever happened between us. You look good, she said. Happy. Glowing. I smiled. Thanks. Guess I've been doing okay. She sipped her wine and then dropped it. You know Hailey and Ethan are really serious, right? I nodded slowly. Okay. She leaned in. I think they'll be engaged soon. And Ethan, he speaks highly of you. Maybe you could say something nice about Hailey at work. Help her get closer to him. My smile didn't break, but inside I felt the twist. After everything, this wasn't an apology. It was a request. Again. Always asking, never giving. Is that why you asked me here? I asked. My mom blinked, surprised. No. Of course not. Well, maybe a little. I put down my fork. You banned me from your party. Dad called me selfish. You all gassed up Hailey like she was royalty. And now that you know I'm Ethan's boss, you want me to play matchmaker? She looked embarrassed. We didn't mean it like that. We were just, I cut her off. You meant it exactly like that. Her face dropped. For the first time, I saw something that looked like regret in her eyes. But it wasn't real. It was fear. Fear that the daughter they discarded might actually be the one holding the keys now. After that lunch, I didn't hear from my mom for 3 days. Then suddenly, my phone was buzzing like crazy, texts from Hailey, my dad, even Aunt Marie, who once said I'd probably end up a lonely tech weirdo. Funny how fast their tone had changed. Hailey's message said, "Hey Maddie, let's do brunch soon, 2 hearts, as if we were ever that close." My dad sent, "Proud of you. Let's catch up this weekend." Catch up. The last time he spoke to me was to say I shouldn't attend my own mother's birthday because I was too competitive. And now he wanted to talk. I ignored all the messages. Not because I was trying to punish them. No. I just needed time to think. Was it worth letting them back in? Would they go back to treating me like I didn't matter once the excitement wore off? The truth was, I didn't trust their sudden love. I knew what real support looked like. It was people like my assistant, Clara, who stayed late to help me during deadlines. People like my co-founder, Brian, who believed in my vision when no one else did. My family only came around when power or money showed up. That Friday, Ethan dropped by my office. He looked nervous, clutching a coffee cup like it was a shield. "Hey, Maddie. Can we talk?" I nodded. "Of course." He sat down, clearly uncomfortable. "So, you know Hailey's my girlfriend, right?" I raised a brow. "Yeah. Found out recently." He sighed. "I didn't mean to cause drama. I had no idea you two were sisters." I stayed silent. He went on, "She's amazing, but lately, it feels like she's more excited about who I work for than who I am." I leaned back in my chair. "And how do you feel about that?" He looked down. Confused. "I love her, but this whole situation feels fake. Like her family suddenly sees me as a trophy." I nodded slowly. "That's because they do." His eyes widened. "You're not surprised?" I gave a small smile. "No. I've lived it my whole life." He looked at me differently then. Not like a boss. Not like Hailey's sister. But like someone who finally made sense. "I didn't come to ask for advice," he said. "I just needed to be honest with someone." I respected that. And honestly, I appreciated his courage. The next day, Hailey showed up at my office unannounced. Lip gloss shining, hair perfect, smile faker than a knockoff bag. "Maddie, you look so professional in here," she said, spinning slowly like she was admiring a museum exhibit. I stayed seated. "What do you want, Hailey?" She blinked. "Wow, rude much?" Then she sat across from me like we were having a spa chat. Okay, so. I know things were weird at Mom's party. But can we, start over? I tilted my head. Start what over? She laughed, too loudly. You know, be friends again. We're sisters, after all. I gave her the same look I gave my interns when they lied on a report. You mean now that your boyfriend works for me? Her smile cracked. No. I mean, okay, maybe a little. I stood up. Hailey, you spent our whole lives treating me like I was nothing. You laughed when Dad told me to stay away. And now I'm your sister again. She stood too, her eyes narrowing. So what, you think you're better than everyone now? I smiled coldly. No. I always was. You're just catching up. That Sunday, I got another call, this time from Aunt Marie. The same woman who once told me, you'll die alone with all that brain and no husband. Her voice was sugary, fake, and full of fake concern. Sweetie, your uncle is turning 60 next week. We're doing a family dinner. Real quiet, just close relatives. You should come. I didn't respond right away. Because we both knew exactly why she was calling. This wasn't about reconnecting. It was about showing me off like a shiny toy. The family had always loved labels. Doctor, engineer, married. Now I was tech CEO and suddenly worth inviting again. I almost said no. But then I thought, why not? Sometimes, the best way to get revenge is just to exist loudly, beautifully, and right in the middle of the people who once buried you. So I said yes. I picked out a simple but expensive black dress, pulled my hair into a clean bun, and arrived fashionably 5 minutes late. The moment I stepped in, the whispers started. I could feel the shift in the air, eyes watching, conversations pausing. I was no longer invisible. I was the center now. And they didn't know what to do with that. I walked into the dining room and scanned the table. My dad looked up and froze. My mom did a fake wave, clearly caught off guard. Hailey looked like she'd swallowed lemon juice. Ethan, seated beside her, had the grace to smile like a human being. But the best reaction came from Aunt Marie. She stood halfway, her smile twitching. Madison, you made it, she said, a little too loud. I walked over, kissed her on the cheek, and sat down like I owned the place. Because in a way, I did. Everyone tried to act normal. Small talk about jobs, kids, vacations. But the tension was thick. At one point, my cousin Luke leaned over and whispered, "Did you really buy your company's building?" I smiled. Yes. I also own the one next door. He blinked like he didn't understand the words. Then Uncle Jim asked Ethan how work was going. Ethan glanced at me and said, "Great. Our company's expanding. Maddie's leading some new tech innovation. She's kind of a beast." Everyone laughed nervously. My dad cleared his throat and finally looked at me. "So, Maddie, do you still work, computers?" I held my glass and said, "Yes, Dad. And computers now work for me." Hailey slammed her fork down. "Okay, we get it. She's successful now. Can we not make this dinner about her?" The room went quiet. Dead quiet. All eyes turned to her. My mom tried to cover it up with a laugh. "Hailey, don't be rude." But Hailey was boiling. "I'm just saying. For years, she was barely around, and now we're all supposed to act like she's the queen." I looked at her slowly. "You don't have to act, Hailey. You can just accept it." She stood up, her voice rising. "You think you're better than me because you're rich. You've always been weird, Maddie. You're just lucky." I leaned forward, my voice calm. "Maybe. But it's funny how my luck built a company your boyfriend works for." Ethan turned red. My dad stood to speak, but before he could say anything, someone else walked into the room. The door opened and in came my company's chief operating officer, Brian. Tall, sharp suit, briefcase in hand. Everyone turned, confused. My mom blinked. "What's he doing here?" Brian walked in with perfect timing, like he'd been waiting behind that door for the moment to hit its hardest. My dad looked at him, confused. My mom's jaw clenched. Hailey's smile dropped completely. "Sorry for crashing," Brian said with a polite nod. But Maddie asked me to swing by for 5 minutes. I stood up slowly, my face calm but heart racing just a little. I hadn't told them yet. And I knew they wouldn't see it coming. Everyone, I said, tapping my glass gently, before dessert, I have a little update I'd like to share. Brian, want to do the honors? Brian opened his briefcase and pulled out a few envelopes. As of this week, Maddie's company has officially merged with another firm to form one of the top 3 tech groups in our region. The paperwork is done. She's now the group CEO. You could literally hear Aunt Marie's fork hit her plate. Oh my God, she whispered. My dad coughed. My mom looked like she needed air. And Hailey. She blinked, then tried to force a smile. Wow. So proud of you, sis. But her voice cracked. Ethan looked from me to Brian and said, You didn't tell me. I smiled. You'll see why. Brian continued, There's more. Maddie's now hiring for new senior roles within the company. This includes one major promotion we've been keeping under wraps. Ethan, would you like to hear it? Ethan's eyes widened. Me? Brian nodded. Yes. Maddie has recommended you for the VP of Product Development role. The room gasped. Ethan stood, shocked. Are you serious? I nodded. You've earned it. But only if you can keep doing the work without letting family drama get in the way. He looked at Hailey, then at me. I won't let you down. My mom leaned over and grabbed my hand. This is incredible. We're so proud of you, sweetie. I pulled my hand away gently. Thanks. But proud of what? You don't even know what I do. She blinked. My dad spoke up. Madison, we just want to understand now. We've made mistakes. I nodded. Yes, you have. And that's okay. But don't confuse your change of attitude with an invitation into my life. The room stayed silent. For once, I had their full attention not because I begged for it, but because I earned it. Quietly. Completely. Powerfully. Then I turned to Hailey. She hadn't said a word since the announcement. Her eyes were on Ethan, her face pale. So, I said, what were you saying about this dinner not being about me? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Ethan sat back down, clearly embarrassed by her silence. My dad tried to cut the tension with a toast, but the moment had already passed. The old rules were gone. This wasn't their table anymore. It was mine now. As Brian packed his briefcase, he winked at me and whispered, That was smooth. I grinned. I wasn't done yet. I had one more surprise, but it wasn't for the whole table. It was for Hailey. And it was going to change everything between her and Ethan forever. Because when people think they know everything about you, that's when you show them the one thing they never expected. I leaned over and said, By the way, I found out how you two met. Ethan doesn't know yet, does he? Her eyes widened in panic. Hailey froze. She knew exactly what I meant, but Ethan didn't. He looked between us, his brows furrowed. What's going on? He asked, confused. Hailey forced a smile and grabbed his hand. Nothing, babe. Maddie's just teasing. I leaned back in my chair, slow and steady, my voice calm. Actually, Ethan, do you remember that startup pitch event you attended at the Harbor Lounge about 6 months ago? The one where you networked with other engineers? He nodded. Yeah, I remember. That's where I met Hailey, actually. I smiled, tilting my head. No, Ethan. That's where I was speaking on stage. And Hailey showed up pretending to be on our tech team. His eyes narrowed. Wait, what? Hailey let out a nervous laugh. Maddie, stop. You're just trying to embarrass me. But the room was too quiet for denial now. I continued, she walked around using my name, telling people she helped build our app. That's how she got into the VIP section. That's how she met you. Ethan's mouth opened slowly. You told me you worked for Maddie? Hailey's voice cracked. I said I worked with her. It's not the same thing. The air in the room felt cold. She was caught. Ethan pulled his hand away from hers. So you lied to me, just to get close. Hailey stood up. No. It wasn't like that. I was just trying to impress you. Everyone was talking about Maddie, and I just wanted to be her, I said calmly. Her eyes snapped toward me. You think you're so perfect. Just because you have money and a company and everyone suddenly cares what you say. I smiled. I don't think I'm perfect, Hailey. I think I'm real. Something you've never been. Ethan stood now too, looking like the truth had just sucker punched him. I really liked you, he said softly. But now I don't even know what's real. My mom tried to step in. Let's not ruin the whole evening. I laughed quietly. It was already ruined the moment you told me not to come. The silence came back. Thick. Heavy. And this time, Hailey didn't even try to fake it. She looked small. Exposed. For once, she had nothing to hide behind. No spotlight to run to. I had taken it, without even raising my voice. All I did was tell the truth. Everyone tried to go back to normal after that, but it didn't work. The energy was broken. Ethan quietly excused himself and left without looking back. Hailey sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap, not touching her food. My mom whispered something to my dad, who just shook his head like he couldn't believe any of it. I waited until dessert was served before standing up. Thank you all for dinner, I said calmly. But I have to go. I've got a business flight to catch. Aunt Marie jumped up. Maddie, wait. Can we take a family photo first? I looked at her and said, you didn't want me in the family picture 2 weeks ago. She looked embarrassed. That was different. You're right, I said. Back then, I wasn't your trophy. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. I didn't owe them anything. Not explanations. Not apologies. Not even a goodbye. But just before I stepped out, Hailey's voice came from behind me, small, shaky. Did you come here just to ruin me? I paused in the doorway and turned halfway. I turned slowly, halfway through the doorway, locking eyes with Hailey. Her voice had cracked when she asked, did you come here just to ruin me? But there was no strength behind it, just fear. Just regret. I took a slow breath and walked back inside 2 steps, just enough for everyone to hear me. No, Hailey, I said. I didn't come to ruin you. You did that all by yourself. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but I didn't flinch. You lied to Ethan. You used my name. You laughed when I was pushed aside. You watched Dad tell me I wasn't welcome and didn't say a word. So no, this isn't revenge. This is the result of who you've always been. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room was still. Even my mom looked like she didn't recognize her daughters anymore. Hailey whispered, you don't have to be cruel. I shook my head. Telling the truth isn't cruelty. You just never expected it to come from me. Because I was the quiet one. The weird one. The one you all ignored. Her tears fell now. But I didn't reach out. Because this was the lesson they all needed. I looked at my dad next. He couldn't hold my gaze. Do you remember what you said to me, Dad? That I made people uncomfortable with my ambition. That I needed to learn my place. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong, he whispered. I was afraid of how far you were going. I nodded. You should be. Because I went further than you ever imagined, and I did it with zero support from the people who were supposed to love me. I turned to my mom. You taught me to be quiet. To let Hailey shine. You told me not to make her feel small. And now, you want to celebrate me like I'm a prize. I'm not a trophy, Mom. I'm a woman who built everything you see with no help from this room. She reached out slowly, but I stepped back. Don't. You only reach when you need something. Aunt Marie started to speak, but I cut her off. Save it. I already know how this story ends. You'll go back to praising Hailey as soon as this dies down. But I won't be around to hear it anymore. I grabbed my bag. Good night. As I stepped out into the night air, I felt a strange calm. Not joy. Not even satisfaction. Just peace. Like I had finally dropped the weight I'd been carrying my whole life. The weight of silence. Of fake acceptance. Of being the family's shadow. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring. I needed a moment. But deep down, I knew he was going to want answers too. He was stuck between 2 women now, the one who lied to him and the one who never said a word. I climbed into my Tesla, started the engine, and drove off into the quiet streets. The world outside the house felt different, real, honest, and mine. But just as I got to the freeway, my phone lit up with a new message. This time, not from Ethan. It was from Clara, my assistant. Emergency board meeting called. Video link in your inbox. Major investor pulled out. My stomach dropped. Not now. Not tonight. I swerved into the next exit and pulled into a dark parking lot, heart racing. I pulled into an empty lot behind a 24-hour diner, hands shaking slightly as I clicked the video link. The screen blinked twice before it opened to the boardroom livestream. 4 faces stared back: Clara, Brian, our head of legal, and Jenna Kim, our biggest investor. Maddie, Jenna said, her voice tight. Glad you joined. We have a situation. I tried to steady my breathing. What happened? Brian jumped in. It's Bluestone Capital. They pulled out of the Series C funding. My chest tightened. That was $11 million. Gone. Just like that. Why? I asked. Jenna looked frustrated. Rumors. Somebody leaked a story that your promotion was personal, not professional. That you gave Ethan the VP job because you're dating him. I sat back, stunned. That's a lie. We know, Clara said quickly. But the media's already circling it. Tech T posted about it an hour ago. It's going viral. My head spun. We need to issue a statement immediately. Jenna crossed her arms. We need more than that. We need to make a move that proves the company's still in control. I knew what she was really saying. You want me to fire Ethan? She didn't blink. That's the only way to shut this down. I looked at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just about family now. This was about survival. About everything I built from scratch. I swallowed hard. He earned that position. He's been working his butt off since day one. Brian looked at me seriously. I know. But perception is reality, Maddie. And this could kill our valuation before we even hit the expansion phase. I hated it. I hated that my personal life, even indirectly, had become ammunition. I thought I'd stayed hidden enough. But the moment I stepped into that party, the moment I let people see, I became vulnerable. I'll handle it, I said finally. Jenna nodded. You have 24 hours. Either make the company look clean, or I pull my investment too. The call ended, leaving me alone in the car with nothing but silence and the low hum of the engine. I stared at my reflection in the black screen. Was this the cost of finally being seen? The cost of standing tall in front of the people who once buried me? I grabbed my phone, opened Ethan's contact, and hovered over the call button. I wasn't sure what I'd say, but I knew it was going to hurt. I drove back to my apartment, the city lights flashing past my windows like angry questions I didn't have answers to. When I stepped inside, everything felt heavier. I tossed my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at my phone. My thumb hovered again. I finally pressed call. Ethan answered on the second ring. Maddie. His voice was tired, soft. Can we talk? I asked. Of course, he replied. You okay? I didn't know how to answer that. I just said, come over. 20 minutes later, he walked in looking nervous, holding a small bag of takeout. Thought you might not have eaten. I gave a small smile. Thanks. We sat down, food untouched. I took a deep breath. There's a problem. Someone leaked a lie about us. Said I gave you the job because we're involved. Bluestone pulled funding. He sat back, eyes wide. But we're not involved. Doesn't matter, I said. They're using your name. He swallowed. What do you want me to do? I looked at him, heart aching. Step down. At least until the storm passes. His eyes clouded. So that's it. Ethan's voice cracked. So that's it. I looked him in the eye, my heart screaming louder than my mouth. It's not about you. It's about survival. This company, it's everything I've worked for. And now it's under fire. He ran a hand through his hair, standing up, pacing. Maddie, I worked hard for that role. You know I didn't get it because of you. And now, I have to step down because of a lie. I nodded slowly, holding my tears back. You're not the one being sacrificed, Ethan. I am. Every time I'm finally seen, I'm punished for it. First, my family, now the industry. He sat back down, his anger melting into hurt. So what? I walk away and just hope you survive this? I sighed. You don't have to walk away forever. Just publicly resign. Say it's temporary. Give them what they want so we can buy time. He stayed silent. I could see him doing the math in his head, the pride, the fear, the risk. And what about us? He asked. That stopped me cold. There is no us, I whispered. Not while the world's watching with knives out. He closed his eyes and nodded. Fine. I'll step down. The next morning, Ethan made the announcement. A clean, professional statement. In light of recent speculation, I've chosen to temporarily step away from my role to protect the integrity of our company. I fully support Madison Taylor and the leadership team. It hit the press like wildfire. Headlines read, VP resigns to shield CEO from nepotism rumors. Some praised him. Others blamed me. But Jenna texted me 2 words, funding restored. It worked. The board calmed down. Clara sent me the good news like it was a lifeline. But nothing about it felt like a win. I sat in my office, staring out at the skyline. Alone again. Like before. Like always. I should have felt powerful. I should have been relieved. But instead, I felt empty. Ethan wasn't just a worker. He was a good man. And I'd pushed him out to protect my seat at the table. Just like they had once pushed me out of theirs. Was I becoming like them? I closed my laptop and left work early for the first time in years. I needed to breathe. To think. To remember why I started all this. That night, I got a call. I almost didn't answer. But the name on the screen stopped me, Dad. I hesitated, then picked up. Maddie, he said softly. I saw the news. I don't know what to say. I stayed silent. You did what you had to do, he continued. And it wasn't fair. None of it was. I was wrong back then. About you. About everything. My throat tightened. Why are you telling me this now? Because I watched you walk away last night and realized, you're stronger than all of us. And I never said I was proud of you. But I am. I closed my eyes. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was something. Thanks, Dad, I whispered. That means more than you know. He cleared his throat. Your mom and I are planning a dinner. Just you. No Hailey. No drama. Just us. If you're ready. I didn't give an answer. Not yet. Because in my heart, I still wasn't sure if they wanted a daughter or a symbol. Before I could process it further, another text came in. From Hailey. It read, we need to talk. Now. It's serious. I hesitated for a long time before replying to Hailey's text. Part of me wanted to ignore it, leave her words on read just like they'd left me out of every important moment for years. But something about the message felt different. Not dramatic. Not fake. Just serious. So I replied, come to the office. Alone. 30 minutes later, she walked in, no makeup, hoodie on, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Not her usual flawless self. She looked tired. Thanks for seeing me, she said. I didn't offer a seat. What do you want? She sighed. I came to say I'm sorry. Not just for the party. Or Ethan. For everything. I raised an eyebrow. That's a lot to cover. She nodded, eyes glossy. I was always jealous of you, Maddie. You were smart, focused, and people respected you without even trying. I had to be loud just to be noticed. I stayed quiet. Mom and Dad made me feel like I had to be perfect. So when you started succeeding, I panicked. I thought if I didn't outshine you, I'd disappear. So I lied. About the job. About Ethan. About everything. For the first time, her voice was shaky. Real. I finally sat down across from her. Why now? I asked. Why not months ago? Years ago? Hailey blinked slowly. Because for the first time, I have nothing left to prove. Ethan left me. That got my attention. He broke up with me last night, she said. Said he couldn't be with someone who hides behind lies. I looked away. That's not my fault. I know, she said quickly. It's mine. And I accept it. She pulled something from her pocket, a tiny notebook. She held it out. This belonged to Dad. He wrote things in here he could never say out loud. He left it in my room the night he called you selfish. I never told you. Because some part of me liked knowing I had something you didn't. I opened the book slowly. Inside were short notes. Scribbled phrases. Thoughts. Regrets. One page hit me hard. Maddie sees the world differently. If I don't understand her now, I just hope I live long enough to catch up. I closed it. My hands trembled. Why show me this now? She shrugged. Because I want you to know he loved you. In his own way. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, Hailey didn't look like my rival. She looked like a girl who had spent her whole life running from a shadow only to find out she was running from herself. I don't hate you, I said quietly. I just stopped waiting for you to love me back. Tears slipped from her eyes. I do, Maddie. I really do. I just didn't know how to show it without feeling like I was losing something. I stood, walked over, and hugged her. Not out of forgiveness. Not out of pity. But because I didn't want to carry the bitterness anymore. It was heavy. And I was done with heavy. She cried into my shoulder like a child. And for a moment, we weren't enemies. We were sisters. Messy, broken, and still trying to figure it out. Don't expect things to go back to normal, I said. They won't. She nodded. I don't want normal. I just want peace. I pulled back and looked her in the eye. Then stop chasing what you think people want you to be. She smiled weakly. You first. 1 week later, I sat at a press conference, announcing the company's new funding round and strategic restructuring. Ethan had officially resigned. Clara was promoted to VP. I stood at the podium, smiling not because I'd won but because I'd survived. After everything they threw at me. After everything I sacrificed. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had respect. And peace. Because in the end, it was never about them. It was always about me. This is the end of this amazing real-life experience. Do not forget to subscribe to get more of this. Thanks. See you in another video.